question 4 then, with the foundation paper from January 2013, but really looking at how you might learn about this question in order to, and how you might then approach other questions. So don't just sit back and watch this and not do anything. Make some notes, think about what you need to do well, write your own lots of times, and then evaluate them. Find the success criteria and self-evaluate your own work in order to make you be able to write about this well. We know that the only thing that makes you better is practice. Okay, so the skill then in question 4 is to compare the effects of presentation. Okay, we know that is going to be the question for question 4. That is always what they are going to ask you, okay, in this exam paper. So you have 18 minutes for this, and again, you need to know how to manage your time really effectively. So look really carefully at the text. You can look at this as soon as you get them. You know to go for the ones that have got the most presentation on them. So for example, in this one with the ladybird spider, you're a bit limited, aren't you, in your comparison there, to compare the ladybird spider photo, that single photo of a spider, with then these 2 texts which have got much more stuff going on. They're going to be much easier for you to talk about. So always make sure, first thing, always make sure you pick the sources that have the most presentation in them, because it's limited. You are always going to be limited if you're just talking about one photo. What is a presentation feature then? Well, these are the choices that's made in the way a text looks. Okay, so examples of this then are colours, images, photographs, the choices of background. Those things are chosen really carefully and really specifically to have an effect on you or to create meaning. What are not presentation features, so if it's a newspaper or a web page or whatever, that is not a presentation feature. That is just what it is. Okay, it's not a presentation feature. The other thing that people get caught up as presentation features are paragraphs. Paragraphs are not a presentation feature. They're a way we structure writing. They're not. We don't do that for the way it looks. So it's thinking about what isn't presentation features as well. But really, you know that you are going to be looking at colour, images, photographs, and perhaps background. A bit like the alliteration, you can be limited in what you might say about font, for example, unless there's a very dramatic font. But the font can be a bit limiting. So one way then that you can start to approach this question is to actually learn the sentence. Both texts use to engage the reader and to add to meaning in the texts. You know, lots of people find it really difficult to just start. So it will be different in different texts. So it might not always have colour that suits both texts. It might not always have images, but it most likely will do. But really what you want to do is find a comparative point, and that will just help you to get started. How do the colours link? Do they link? That's not to say that you don't need to talk about colour. You can absolutely talk about colour and its effect in one article. You don't need to say there is no colour in the other article, because the absence of one in one isn't a comparative point. It's thinking about what they do to do things differently. Okay, so learning that little phrase is an easy way to start you off and to help you approach the question. Okay, so the skill is to compare the effects of presentation. You need about 4 point evidence explain or TP paragraphs you have to identify a presentation feature. That is colour, that is an image, that is photographs, that is the background. So then you need to say what it does and why. So go on about it in the same way that you should develop your comments on language features. It's that same developed comment in presentation features, and in some way might seem a little bit more obvious. So how is the text the same or different from the other one? Okay, so here's a way that you can approach this then. So if we look at Steve Backshaw's Looking for Adventure cover of his biography, we've got two photographs there of Steve looking very lovely. So in the top picture, he's looking quite thoughtful. He's very kind of brooding, isn't he? He's kind of seems to be really intensely thinking about something, and that gives us a sense, doesn't it, of him being a kind of thoughtful person. He's someone, we get a sense of him being somebody who thinks deeply about things from that picture. And then in the photograph at the bottom, we also get that photo of him looking up at the camera, of him going down into the darkness, but he's also really smiling. So we get a sense of him going into dangerous situations, but also that real sense of joy that he gets in that, and obvious excitement and pleasure that he takes in that we can see that from the expression on his face. So in these two photographs they use in this picture, we get these two kind of sides to Steve here, where on the one we get possibly the guy we see on Deadly 60, you know, having these adventures and going off around and doing really dangerous things. But we also get this sense of him being perhaps a little bit of a more complicated character, as somebody who really thinks about things, and a bit, I suppose, a little bit more depth to his character there than perhaps the man we see on the television. We also get that idea, don't we, in the bottom in the photograph of the kind of natural environment that he likes to go in, this nature that is very much a big part of his life and the way that we know him. We also get this sky at the top, which gives us, I suppose, a sense of the expanse of his adventures, you know, that he goes kind of all over the world. And a little glimpse, I think, of mountains in the background there. So we get a sense of basically all the places that we know that he would travel to, if you know who he is. If you don't, then you'd have to kind of guess some things about the kind of person that he is. And you can do that really by the Looking for Adventure title of his book as well, can't you? And that's really interesting because you've got that yellow colour for that font there. So yellow is often a colour that's associated both with happiness and joy and sunshine, but it's also a colour that is associated with being poisonous and something being toxic. And actually in nature, that's things that are yellow are quite often quite poisonous. As a further meaning, you can also see it as somebody being scared or a bit of a coward. But we don't really get a sense of that here. Here we do get a sense of it being perhaps about this sense of joy and happiness that he finds in his life as an adventurer and an explorer, but also that sense of danger that's also there as well, perhaps. The fact it's got kind of muddy splashes on it as well add to that idea of it being outside and dirty and perhaps a little bit wild. So that's a focused example there, being able to say it's yellow, but also it's got the kind of tiny details on those muddy splashes that go on it. That's a focused example. Okay, so then if we look at the Hedgehog Home one, a little bit more difficult in terms of presentation and in terms of language features too. However, there are some key things there, and I suppose one of the ways that we think about photographs, quite often when you look at the photographs, look at how they're laid out. So we've got the two sides of Steve in the previous example, but here they kind of overlap a little bit, and they look like they've just been laid out like that. So on the one hand, more obviously, we get a sense of the photographs instructing us to do something and telling us the different stages of if we were to make a hedgehog home, what that would look like. But we also get a sense of somebody having done that and making the photographs and laying those out like that. It seems less formal, more casual, and I suppose like somebody's just done that in their scrapbook. So like a project book that they keep in order to record things that they've made. So we get a sense of that being perhaps like somebody has made it. We also have there the instructions in those with the faded background, but the other most obvious thing there is the background. The background, if you look very closely, is leaves. So it's leaves behind it, and they're brown and reddish to show that it's about autumn. And that's because hedgehogs like leaves, they like to live in leaves, but they also hibernate in the autumn. So that's the reason why they've chosen it. It gives, I suppose, the effect of giving you a sense of the home of the hedgehog, and perhaps the sense of the time of the year in which you might make a hedgehog home. So if we look then at an example of how you might write about this, so both texts use colour to engage the reader and to add to meaning within the text. So that's just using that sentence to help get started, and is a comparison. It's beginning to compare. Source 2 uses yellow for the font in looking for adventure. This is to link to the adventure that Steve may be looking for in the text. This is because the yellow could be associated with the hazard and danger, and this shows the danger that will be in Steve's adventures in his biography. Similarly, source 3 uses colour to add to the autumn feel within the text. They do this because the colours are like autumn leaves and hedgehogs live in leaves. Both texts use colour to show nature. That's quite clear. We've got examples of presentation features, and attempt to compare that there with some comment on the effect. There's some comment there. This example is better. Okay, so both texts use colour to engage the reader and to contribute to the meaning within the text. Source 2 uses the yellow font on looking for adventure. So I'm kind of doing two things there. I'm talking about the yellow, but I'm also talking about the font. If you're talking about font, really you want it to back up a point that you're already making. This is to link to the adventures that Steve Bagshaw may be looking for in the text. This is because the yellow could be associated with the hazard and danger, but you can also associate this with happiness, which shows Steve's happiness in these dangerous environments. There are also muddy splashes on the writing that shows it will be outside and dirty. This suggests the danger that there may be in Steve's adventures and the wildness of it. Similarly, so really linking phrase here, really important. I'm using that to tie the 2 points together. Source 3 uses colour to add to the autumn feel within the text as reddish brown colours are used. They do this because the colours are like autumn leaves. You can also associate this colour with the hibernation of the hedgehogs, which makes it seem like a hedgehog home and help the reader imagine the hedgehog environment. Both texts use colour to link to the different purposes of the text. They both use colour to show nature, but source 2 shows the wildness and danger of the wild, but source 3 uses colour to represent the safety and the homes for hedgehogs. Okay, so much more detailed, and really what I'm using there is my clear linking topic sentence, which you can learn that. know that that might be something that you use in question 4. Both texts use to engage the reader and to add to the meaning within the text. That is pretty much always going to be so. So learn that as a phrase to help you get in there and start writing, basically. Connecting phrase, and then my little bit of talking about both of them at the same time. So really just recapping my points. Both texts use this to do something. Okay? So then, use this success criteria then to help guide you in your question 4 responses from different exam papers, and use these models really to help you see about how you can make a better focused example of comment on really effect. Okay, I should point out as well that this isn't my whole response. I'm going to have different points where I maybe just talk about one text at the same time, and the other text not at the same time, on its own, and then the other text on its own too. Okay, but I'm going to have one paragraph in here where I say both texts do this. Okay, so this isn't my whole response, it's just part of it in order for you to get a sense of how you might compare, because that's the thing people do actually the least well, is they don't really compare the two texts. Okay, so top tips then. Once again, timing, absolutely imperative, essential that you do this. Make sure you focus on a presentation feature. Don't get worried about talking about the language feature. Don't do that. You will not get marked. Compare both texts similarly or in contrast. So these are phrases that you can learn and know that you're going to use in question 4. So have a focused example as well, and that's a really quite a easy thing to do in many ways, in that you just give the details of the picture. So there's a difference between having a photo of Steve's face or having Steve looking up at the camera and smiling as he plummets down into the danger. That is a focused example. So making sure you go into detail, don't just say the photo of Steve. It's an easy way for you to gain extra credit by just talking a little bit in more detail about what the picture is actually, or presentation feature is actually doing. So you want to use 4 or 5 point evidence explain paragraphs or TP paragraphs, and then explain in detail what the effect is. And I suppose one of the things that you can do here is really research what different colours mean. For example, there are lots of different meanings to colours, and to think about why is purple different than bright Barbie pink. Think about why dark grey might be used rather than pale blue. So think about what and research. If you don't know, find that out. Find out some things about different colours and how they might be used. And that will help you to be able to talk about the effect. Okay, so use that then to prompt you to write more in a more focused way for question 4, not just for this exam paper obviously, for the question 4 responses that you're now going to do